such a thing I've never encountered, a symmetrical hall, where there are alternative spaces, identical spaces facing each other on both sides. So unless somebody had the idea to build a theater of this kind, this wouldn't be a realistic representation of anything. So my original idea, though, was that it could be built and transported on some kind of an ocean-going craft, and so that the company goes on tour, so does the hall. Everybody hears the same thing. And when I brought it to a firm of architects in Boston, I was persuaded to do this, but I was very, very reluctant to this. They said, well, if you tow this thing into a harbor, you'd have not only the harbor taxes to pay, and the state taxes, and the city taxes and fees, and parking tax, aquatic parking taxes, whatever they call them. You'd have all that, and it would be a very expensive proposition to do, even if you could find an ocean-going craft that you could build this thing onto. But it's a good idea, don't give up. So, and why don't you build the thing anyway? I said, well, build it, but I said, well, it's a cheap hall, and they got out an envelope, started scribbling on it. Oh, it wouldn't cost more than 11 or 12, I said 11 or 12 what? Oh, $1 million, of course, that's nothing. So the cheap hall never got built because it never got financed. Well, what would that be now? This was about 20 years ago, $11 million.
Twice that, at least, I'm sure.
It'd be more than double, wouldn't it? But he was contemptuous of the thing because it was all built out of wood and it didn't have all this foundation work that architects like. Well, the other thing is that there are only a few things that I found that are certain about halls. Anything that is perched high up now, capable of playing high pitches, like piccolos or violins near the end of the fingerboard, or even a voice at the top of its compass is going to sound higher. I mean, it's not that the pitch will be higher, but it'll give the unmistakable impression of greater height. Anybody can try that and we'll find it, so we know that. Now, also, and this hall isn't particularly well fitted for it. I described my experiment of something under the floor through vents, but that's a rare thing. What is much less rare is usually a back part of the hall, one part, all the balconies. Now, under the bottom balcony is the worst place for anybody to be, except loud instruments playing low notes. If you put the bass drums and the bass steel drums and the low gong under there, it'll sound lower than usual. And this doesn't vary, although just about everything else in the hall does vary as far as its acoustics go. Now, something like this is supposed to deal with a problem that Philip mentioned last night, that somebody in the audience is close to a performer. This thing here, with the idea of performers standing behind the audience and blowing over their heads, or playing through that if they're stringed instruments, is an attempt to satisfy that. this wouldn't be an impossible thing if halls were rationally constructed with a reasonable space left just blank for possible experiments. There wouldn't be any reason to do that. Otherwise, it's not necessary to experiment with how would this sound here or how would this sound here. If the sounds are widely enough separated, they're going to be all right in any of those positions. Plus the special features of the cavernous space under balcony, low down, and the highest position for high voices. So it's more a matter, I think, of how the piece is designed originally than trying to see what would happen if you put this here and what you put this here. It's going to be all right if there's enough space so that it doesn't annoy anybody, and besides, or be close to another group. And that's the thing that will defeat the whole thing. If two groups are adjacent, they'll invariably get in each other's way, and they get in each other's way in manners that are not favorable to the total sound. In other words, they cause mixtures of tone quality that don't mix, and that are worse than non-mixing. They make haphazard, random, or disagreeable, almost mixing sound. So that all that is necessary is a place that's rigged up in such a way that there are places to put musicians at every level, and space on either side. Now, when I mean space, I don't mean a foot. There should be 10 feet, not less than 10 feet before the next one appears. And this works vertically the same way. Now, if you look at this thing, it would be possible to have moving players in what is the usual audience area, and it's not very well designed for moving players in the rest of the hall any more than other halls are. But I've made experiments with this, and it's there are two things that are just in the natural world so constructed that they don't work favorably. For instance, a parade, an outdoor parade. Well, part of it is visual. You see them down there at Bank Street, and then presently they're over there at Tank Street. But the actual musical effect of the motion forward is not emphatic because they're not going fast enough. Now, how fast is fast enough? It's pretty fast. I've made experiments with an athletic young man, singer. I said, now, run around this hall as fast as you can go. And he could do that. And in being good shape, he could still sing. And I've even tried it with people on a bicycle when I had space. But one of two things happen. He's moving fast, but the sound doesn't go. It's not fast enough for there to be an emphatic motion of the sound. Or if it is fast enough, it has to be such a primitive form of musical material that it doesn't lend itself to much musical treatment. I mean, a holy note or something like that, or a shriek. But if otherwise, I mean, if you had some kind of a faster than a golf course, something like those things they have in airports that carry baggage and that move silently and quite fast. If you have something that goes that fast, it distorts the music, and you can't tell what it is. It's moving too fast. It just blurs it out of intelligibility. All these experiments I've attempted, and this is what it's come down to: that motion is very disappointing. Now, if it's disappointing horizontally, it's even more so vertically. I had great hopes of ladders or moving or elevators in old buildings in New York, warehouses. They have elevators with floors only. Well, you have somebody go up and turn the thing as fast as it'll go. It'll go about like this, and you think standing here, that's going to be a brilliant diminuendo, or if you start here and come down, you can get a brilliant crescendo. It's nothing of the sort. It's weak and feeble, and very disappointing. And even more so with if there's a ladder all the way up or a very steep staircase. A singer can manage that and sing, but nothing special happens during that. He might as well be in the middle or on the bottom. These are all great disappointments. Well, these are the limitations of trying to get spatial music that moves. On the other hand, there's one effect that's well known in churches, especially processions of people carrying candles. I'm not talking about the candles, but the procession. If it's music that is very slow moving as far as note values go, and they walk at a measured pace, and the length of the church, there is a distinct diminuendo. And it takes time to do this, because you have to have slow music and enough space for them to get there. It's well known in the theater, when the stage is big enough, especially only a few people are exiting. So that's one of the things that there are the realities of writing in indoor space music. Now, it's also true outdoors to some extent, but outdoors are even a worse hazard than indoors. All you have to have is a little rain or a little wind or a little city traffic, and your whole texture is in danger. And I've done well, a piece I did in Lincoln Center that has four orchestras. Three of them are wind bands, large wind ensembles from 40 to 60 players, and the fourth one is West Indian steel drums. And there were places where, in what was supposed to be a spatial canonic effect, and not just the one line, but a whole complicated texture played by one orchestra, and then the other one starts a couple of bars later and plays it without rhythmic relation to the first one. And the wind was sometimes such that you missed an entrance entirely. That's one of the hazards. Well, I'll tell you about I think the worst defeat in my whole history of trying to do spatial music. It was in the same hall, but a different piece. It started to rain, and at that time, I think they still do. It's like a big cafe. There are outdoor tables and people eating there. So with a light drizzle, people started to leave, and came down harder. And the sounds that you heard from my piece, which was loud enough so that it blasted people out of the hall when we rehearsed it indoor, you could hardly hear a note of it. It was a faint, mean drizzle. And then came the first authentic sound of the piece, a crash of thunder. And that that made the comparison even more humiliating. I realized I had to have something on that scale. Now, if you believe in my religion, which is absolutely no electronics or amplification, whatever, this isn't such a simple thing. How am I going to find an acoustic sound that can stand up to a real thunderstorm? Now, I've done artificial ones, as many other composers are, but the real thing is something quite different. So it wasn't long before there wasn't a soul in the square, except the unfortunate musicians. And maybe I ought to go backwards with this story. I wanted to get on the balconies of the Met Opera House, the State Theater, and Fisher Hall, which are arranged in a rectangle where they'd be protected, and also as a result of a few experiments I made, but pretty audible because of a good back rebounding surface. I saw ahead enough so that I went to see the fountain engineer. There's a big fountain in the middle of a square there. It makes an awful racket. And I got my permit, and so the day of the performance, I went down to the engine room and flirted my permit, and then took a look at it. 7BX, it should be 7BX2 for Sundays. You can't, we can't turn off the fountain, sorry. So that was shot down. So I knew I'd have to compete with that. So then I went into the State Theater, and I said, so where are you going? I said, I'm going to the balcony. I got permission to use it. Was not anymore. There was a visiting chorus last Sunday, and they brought their lunch, and we had a terrible time cleaning up, so no more. Two of my places shot down. So that I thought, well, it's still the Opera House, and I went in there, and a couple of men stopped me and asked me what I want. I said, well, I'm going up to the balcony. They said, well, if you want to go up to the balcony, it's getting on 4 o'clock, after 4 o'clock, overtime, double overtime on Sunday. That was it. They said, but you can stand under the balcony if you wish. So there we were, under the 3 balconies, getting drenched, and the soggy membranes for the timpani, it was blop, and the tubas were getting soaked up with water, and it was the most depressing experience I've ever had. But everybody played right to the end, just the same. Then the next day in the New York Times, I got a column which said that Brant's remarkable, adventurous, and totally successful piece charmed a large audience. Well, that's a good example of absent journalism. I can't account for it anyway. So they're the things that the spatial composer should be prepared to anticipate, and they can't be guessed in advance any more than I could. And by that time, I'd done about 40 indoor space pieces of all of them different, and I got to see how this is. But out of doors still scares me. I wouldn't want to try it again. The best places would be little towns in Italy that are, everything is very close together, or any kind of walled towns, or amphitheaters. Vitruvius knew how to build those amphitheaters, and there are places where there usually isn't much wind, and so there's a chance there. But American open spaces are hardly the place for spatial music, or parades where there aren't high buildings in between. Now, not to mention Sunday traffic or weekday traffic, or in Lincoln Center. There was one place that scared me to death. Low-flying planes buzzed down on the square, and everybody looked around, and the assistant conductor that I was counting on, he had to see me. He looked up, and instead of looking at me, I thought, when is he going to come in? We're through. We're never going to get it. Well, somehow we got out of that trouble. So the life of a spatial composer who's interested in the outdoors is full of variety, also full of hazard, and I would say there's about 50% chance of success. Once in a while you might get 10 minutes. Well, in Amsterdam, where I had a procession of boats going through the square, through the canals, and some of the canals are very narrow, so I calculated correctly. There isn't much business there. I could write quiet music and be fairly assured of quiet, and we got it. I also calculated that when we passed a big square, we needed a lot of sound, and so that's where I put the brass bands, and they were to play when the procession of boats approached the square, and at that point, each boat having a jazz drummer with instructions to cut loose at such times, the piece did not fade away when we got next to a big square. Well, some of those things seem obvious, and some of them don't seem so obvious. They were all surprises to me for the first time. But that's the closest I could come to a handbook for the spatial composer. These are the definite things you can count on. Many of them are bad news, and that's all you can count on. And the rest is a matter of composing, rather than trying out things in the hall. There's nothing to try out. Everything's going to work if there's space, and if you take care of the high notes and take care of the low notes. That is, writing music especially for those, and then the rest of it can be adjusted. It's a matter of orchestration. I mean, you wouldn't put a group of 30 strings playing in harmonics next to a brass group playing violent jazz in the concert hall. So you wouldn't do it in trying to do spatial music either. That's just ordinary knowledge. Well, beyond that, the only thing I have to offer is this, but this is not a small thing. The piece should be written out from end to end in episodes, which could be thought of separately. That is, first this is going to play, and then that's going to play, and then that's going to play. A continuous tutti, which is not uncommon among conventional Western music, will sound like a conventional tutti, but it'll sound worse in a way, because the sound will be diffused around. The other thing is this: not to have exactly the same kind of music in different parts of the hall. It'll be like an airport, where everything you hear comes from all over, and it's impossible to determine what its origin is. Well, now that goes against the intentions of what most people want to write. But it's a question of more of composing and orchestration than it is of something special for the space. Well, as far as I know, I'm the only person who's attempted this, who has investigated this with any thoroughness. Now, many of the boys in Europe, not many, but a certain amount, have tried a spatial piece without any first-hand knowledge of what I'm talking about, and some of them go so far as, in their first attempt, to use both electronic and live sound. Well, the results are what you might expect from uncontrolled accidents. I think halls could easily be built which would accommodate space music, and also the needs of the present repertory, living and dead. All that would be necessary would be to persuade whoever is financing this thing, spend a little more on empty spaces throughout the hall. Put them anywhere you like. Empty spaces where you could put from 3 to more, 20 or something, stages if you want to do it that way, and then leave spaces between those stages and the next one of those, whether it's above or sideways. The spatial effect of something that is coming from a medium, a high location, let's say halfway up the hall, so that would be maybe 40 feet or 30 feet, I would say it's neutral. It gives it the impression of separation, certainly, but not specially of more direction than something separated on a horizontal level. But no great harm can be done. Now, with something like on this plan, it would be possible. Let me see. Yes. If, for instance, of this area here, and that one opposite, were occupied, would say the audience is not going to be in there from floor to ceiling. If you station, let's say, a string orchestra there, the basses are standing on the floor in front of this, then come the cellos, then the violas, then the violins. Now, let them play what they're used to be playing, and you say, well, sort of something, I don't know. But if you say, if the music is going to be written in advance, with the range of the basses confined to an octave and a half, and they stay there, and the cellos another 2 octaves above that, and they don't go below the highest bass range, then the viola is the same way, then the violinist. And if the composer has the moral courage to carry out that scheme, whether harmonic or contrapuntal, you get something out of that wall, or the wall suddenly becomes resonant. But all these conditions have to be observed. I've done it, and it's with a system of this kind, things can be attempted that wouldn't especially be striking if they're all on the stage in their usual arrangements. If there are 50 strings or 60 strings, and you want to write a separate contrapuntal part, a separate line for each one, and it takes a while to do this. Let's say it's diatonic if you want something diatonic, or if you want one little flavor of some kind, make your own new scale, some Bartok scale or something like that. Or if you've got time, and you want to add a microtone or a slide, although this is dangerous. I'm talking about something that the first time it's played, bang, you got it. And the musicians do not fight if their parts play well from their point of view. Well, how many halls have something like that straight up? Not many. I look when I go to a new hall, straight up and down each side for it. I've only found one or two. So the spatial music does have a few unmistakable realities, but you don't find them often enough to make it appear that these are like, well, they're acoustic phenomena. There's no getting around it. And I found this out by my, let's say, 20th spatial piece. I began to get a sense of this. By my 50th, it was much better, and toward the 100th, I was aware of all this stuff that I'm telling you about, and there isn't a lot more unless we have halls that are rationally constructed, and it needs nothing but acoustical. See, here are some of my earlier attempts. I've written one spatial opera, and I had these little characters. So I was experimenting with placing them in different positions, and I made little toy instruments just to see what the thing would look like, and using the space in various ways. You can see the condition of the building was a good deal better 20 years ago than it's since become. I don't know what this thing is like. Oh, I suppose I was thinking of Noah's Ark, the things in a seagoing vessel, and these are stairways to climb up one place to another. This is a good idea of it, because Linus, my son, left out all the siding, so you could look right through the thing. See, I'm talking to musicians now, and so it's easy and enjoyable. But imagine trying to address an audience on the subject of spatial music in a modern hall that has no balconies at all, and a low ceiling. There I am, just jabbering my brains out and not making any sense. And what is vivid and extraordinary when it's done turns out to be a flat bunch of burble, just like any visiting composer. And it seems to be of doubtful factual interest and speculative to the point of unintelligibility. At least what I've been able to talk about are facts, which come from my own experience. Above all, the spatial writing music is a practical matter, or else it's not even there. Now, my despised contemporary, Stockhausen, some years ago, around the time I wrote my first spatial piece, no, it was after that. Mine was performed in 1953. He made this announcement in 1958 with his piece, Gruppen, for 3 orchestras. Now, this was his first spatial piece, and he made a big deal out of it. It's the first thing like this in music history, an absolutely new development. And then he, on his American tour, a few people reminded him, well, okay, that we did the first piece, played in 1958. Brant did the second one in 1953. But his thing, I've heard it. It doesn't sound like much. Now it's true, he says separate the three orchestras, and they're each about 30, 35 players. But he made the dumb mistake of having each one contain woodwinds, brass, percussion, and strings. So there's nothing for the direction and the position to distinguish. You don't know really what you're hearing. And they're all in the same style. Now, what I've described wouldn't do for music in the same style, because you'd get it all mixed up and there'd be no reason for having the space. It wouldn't make anything clearer. So a group comes in Stockhausen's piece, and then another one comes in, so what, you'd think some greater sonority, some revelation of timbres comes in, but all it sounds like flat, dull, tepid, and arbitrary. But in yours, oh, what a great new sound. It's not a great new sound. It's an inept, tepid, bland, old sound. What I'm talking about is whenever you hear an entrance of a group, you hear something that's, first of all, clear. You know what it is. And the way I do it, it always plays the same kind of music. It never exchanges music with anyone else. So you know if something's going to come up that way, what's going to play it, and what you can expect to hear. Now, these are not part of the ironclad commandments of space music, but it's a good thing to follow. And it's one of the merits of the spatial method is if you want to combine music from different traditions, different ethnic traditions, you can do it. All right. Now, my favorite example is we've decided, for reasons of our own, that we're going to have a piece that consists of a gamelan orchestra of 12 playing gamelan music. Then we're going to have a hot big band playing a violent swing in its own style. Then we're going to have a big chorus which is going to sing a part of a mass by Victoria. Put them on the stage together and say, go. So what do you expect you're going to hear? Well, you wish they'd all go away, or at least two of them would go away. Now, separate them in the hall as really widely as possible, and you will hear all three of them distinctly. And that's one of the things I do. I never try to change the style of a performance of something in its own tradition, nor do I attempt the heresy of trying to mix two of them together. That seems to me an impiety. But it's oddly enough, when I've had a piece like Meteor Farm, which had, I think, 4 such groups. There was a West African drummer, and I asked the leader of each group, I said, would you have any objection to performing in your own manner if that gamelan group at the back of the hall is going to perform something in its own manner? All you have to do is be willing to start when I indicate it and stop when I indicate it, and we can agree on the kind of places. They all, without hesitation, said if we can do it our own way, it's only democratic for everyone else to be able to do that. So either writing only in the Western tradition, I try to find the most contrasted things possible in that tradition and put them in different places, each with its own instrumentation. And so either I do that with Western music as far as I can. Now, this is stretching the resources of our tradition more than we're accustomed to. There isn't much that we've got in real, that has real contrast, and it takes very adroit management of the best authors, both living and dead. I vow to both of them again in order to do this. Well, that's my story, and it'll continue when the people who have to do with the building, new civic buildings, get interested in it. And as you can guess, it takes a special kind of experience and training to write spatial music at all. And I've thought of trying to write something down, but do you think any of this could be written down in such a way that when read, it would suggest anything of what we're talking about? Well, here I rest my case as in about the same way as I've been doing it for the last 30 years, because since then I've acquired new possibilities and experiences. There it is, empty, and no composer wants to write anything about it. There's the most extraordinary lack of interest in spatial music, except for people who think, oh yeah, we'll try it. They regard it as some little gimmick. We'll write one and see what it sounds like, and goodbye. And end of. So my case stops about here, but this is only the year 2003, and who knows what happens, what might happen tomorrow.
Do you have any questions about it, Phil?
Yeah, let's talk something if something occurs to you.
No, I thought that was great. I mean, first of all,
wonderful.
that can easily be transcribed, and so your handbook will be in print very shortly, or at least on the internet, for people to gain your wisdom.
What'll it look like though, written down? It'll be just some monomaniac.
Yeah. And well, they can also listen to the tape if it came out. If they want to sit down for an hour and listen to you talk about it, that would be.
And
they will also
maybe
do that.
have something to look at.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If they have a model that they can kind of turn around and look at on the internet while you talk about it, I think that'll
It can be a little slideshow.
probably get people pretty good.
I was thinking with your Bryce 3D program, you can set this on sale on ocean waves. There can be a sunset over there, mountains in the distance.
And you can talk all about it.
And this can be kind of rocking on the ocean very slightly.
And then we'll make it sink while you say it was $11 million.
Have you ever seen one of these?
You without a hat? No, who is that?
His hat's on the top.
That is a contrabass saxophone.
Oh boy.
And this was during the recording of Cleopatra, where we had all 7 of them. And we had, and when was this? I don't know, 60-something? We had trouble getting this instrument or somebody who could play it. And they're good at this in Hollywood. No matter what it is you're looking for, they're going to find it if it exists. So I said, well, there's an attorney in San Diego who plays one on Saturday night Dixieland gigs. So we thought, well, what do they play like? Well, pretty good. He can play a lot of stuff. So the studio paid him for so that he did a week's work in court to come down and play this thing.
Yeah, it says Hollywood, March 1963. HB with contrabass saxophone. You said there were 7 of those, or just one?
It just one. The entire series. There's contrabass, bass, baritone, tenor, alto, soprano, and high soprano. And when you hear a jazz group with 5 playing in the middle of the register, well, that sounds like that. But when you hear them all like this, it's the ideal Brahms sound for the wind instruments in an orchestra. It's much superior to a Brahms tutti.
Yeah, I heard the Odine Pope saxophone choir once in Philadelphia, and they've got like 9 or is it 13, from very low to very high. I don't remember a contrabass.
Probably not.
No.
And did they have the E flat soprano that's
Yeah,
about like that?
sopranino. Yeah, it was a gorgeous sound.